Good morning, everybody. I make it 10 o'clock, so we'll start this morning's webinar. Thank you for joining us for our webinar around FFT's Aspire Attendance Tracker. I hope it's something that you'll find useful. My name's Sean Green. I'm a product manager at FFT, responsible for Aspire Attendance Tracker. I'm joined this morning by my colleague, Mike Dukas, who's our customer service advisor. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. You'll have heard that we're recording the session. Please do keep cameras on. They'll only record me. It's nice to see people. It's almost like being back in a room that we used to do these sessions in. Mike will answer questions. If you've got any questions, direct them to Mike FFT via the chat facility at the bottom. He'll also at the end, if you want to come on screen and ask a question, he can do that as well. Slides are going to be made available after the presentation. We have a support team who will be able to answer any questions that you might have beyond this, specifically about your school's data, and the contact details are there below. So looking at today's webinar, we're going to cover what Attendance Tracker is. We're going to look at how it fits with the next generation Aspire that I'm sure you'll have heard a lot about over recent weeks. We're going to look at the reports themselves. We'll look at some latest research and then some new developments. And then, as we said, we've got some time at the end for any questions. So firstly, what is Attendance Tracker? It's an automated system. It brings reports to you every week, and it allows you to compare your current live attendance to other schools across the country. Now, this is something that was fairly unique when this was launched, and it gives you a sense to see what attendance looks like in your school, and then also across our very large national sample. But beyond the whole school figure, you can drill down and you can look at year groups, you can look at pupil groups and get those like-for-like comparisons. So how do your year nines compare to other year nines? How do your boys compare to other boys across the country? Going beyond that, you can go into individual pupil attendance. So you can use this to look at individual pupils, see where they might be missing certain sessions, see what their trends are like as it goes through the year. And because we go right back to the start of the academic year, you can see trends in whole school, group, and pupil attendance right from the start of the academic year to where we are now and beyond as we continue the academic year. Looking at latest numbers, we actually started this almost exactly 2 years ago this week, and we started with a group of 20 secondary schools who were part of a pilot group, and the numbers increased, and you can see where we were roughly a year ago today at just over 7,500. And I'm delighted this week that we've actually broken the 10,000 barrier. So we've gone to 10,069 unique schools receiving attendance reports from us every week. So you can see you've got a very strong sample there to compare your data against. That figure is broken down roughly into something like 7,500 primaries and 2,500 secondaries. So we have a significant proportion of all primaries and secondaries sharing data with us and receiving attendance reports. We're often asked how it works. Basically, everything is driven by your MIS. That's where your attendance data is stored. It's shared with us with your agreement. We collect that data and we process it, we aggregate it. And what we can do from that is we can actually produce these reports that come to you on a weekly basis. So everything is driven by the attendance data that sits inside your MIS. I'm sure that just about everyone here today has got attendance reports. If you haven't got attendance reports, then it will be related to an issue around Aspire Data Exchange. And Aspire Data Exchange is something we set up a few years ago. It allows us to safely and securely transfer data from your school's MIS to our servers. It's really easy to set up. There's a link on the Aspire homepage. It keeps all of your student and school information up to date. So we're not relying on waiting for updates from the DFE or anything such as that. It means that you can keep leavers, joiners, etc. up to date and on your system. It's a really key part of all our developments here at FFT. So regardless of Attendance Tracker, any other of our big developments is going to really rely on Aspire Data Exchange. So it's really important if you haven't set it up that you do so. It's a really quick way of doing it. You'll know if you need to do it because you'll get a message on the homepage. So you'll get one of these two messages. The one at the top will say you actually need to set up a data exchange connection to access our products. The one at the bottom will be a situation whereby you have set up Aspire Data Exchange, but you haven't accepted our latest data sharing agreement. And our latest data sharing agreement is really crucial because that's what allows us to take your attendance data. So it could be that you've got an Aspire Data Exchange connection, but you haven't updated the data sharing agreement. But if you click on the links on the homepage, it will take you through, and they are very, very quick jobs. Any issues, please contact our support team. Assuming you have attendance reports, let's look at how you access them. And again, if you go in via your Aspire homepage, I'm sure recently you've spotted this where it says New Aspire Home. That will take you through to what we're calling our next generation Aspire. And it's a whole range of changes. Predominantly, you can see around estimates and target setting, but attendance tracker actually features very much front and center on this homepage. So if you look at the homepage there, you can see attendance tracker has its own tile, if you like, and we're going to look at that in a bit more details. In this attendance window, you'll see weekly and year-to-date school headlines. So you've got your school figures, you've got how that compares to national, and then the difference between them. The default on there is the latest week. If you want to go in and look at the year-to-date, you can go in and you can change it, and it will show you the year-to-date figures. And again, you've got your school and then the phase that you are aligned to, either secondary or primary, and then you've got the national figure that sits behind it, and then the difference, obviously, between the two. You've also got this very visual week by week attendance trends that will go right back to the start of the academic year. So you can spot any trends in your attendance, how your school is compared to national, to what extent have you been above, in line, or below the national figure as you've gone through the academic year. If you want to look at the actual data that sits behind that, by flicking the switch there at the top right, you will get a data view. So you can see the trend lines on the previous view. This will actually give you the full data set for your school and national, and again, the difference between them, with reds and greens indicating the depth of the difference between your school and a national figure. We can also do a lot of links to the research that we do at FFT. Our data research team, FFT Education Data Lab, very prolific in blogs that they put out on a weekly basis, and attendance has been a new area for them to really focus on. So lots of attendance and absence blogs. There's one there about absence in the first half term. As we approach the end of the second half term, that will be updated to see what's happened as we've moved into autumn 2, if you like. And then finally, the other thing that you can see on there is you can see a link through to your report. So by clicking that link at the top, that will take you through to this report homepage that you'll have got used to seeing. So you can see at the top there your list of reports, 360 school, pupil, the archive 360, etc., and the traditional way which you would access your weekly attendance reports. So let's look at the reports. We have made a lot of changes for autumn 2022, and I'm sure you've noticed them. Certainly the login figures would indicate that these changes have been very popular with schools. As with everything with attendance tracker, this has been driven by what schools have requested. So as I said, we started a few years ago with 20, we're now over 10,000. And all the way through, as the numbers have increased, we're getting more and more really valuable feedback from schools saying it would be really good if we could have this feature or this filter or something such as that. So looking at some of the things that are new for autumn 22, I'm sure primary colleagues will have noticed that reception pupils have been included. That was a really popular piece of feedback, that primary schools wanted to see reception pupils alongside years 1 to 6. So you've got the full suite of year groups within that report. The other thing that you'll have noticed as well, one of the other things rather, is an enhanced absence report. The COVID impact report, which has been there for the last 2 years, has gone. Thankfully, we don't have to record COVID now in terms of IO1, IO2, XO1, XO2, etc. COVID is, as you'll be aware, just classified as another illness. So the COVID impact report has gone, and that's allowed us to work on the absence report. So what we can do in the absence report, as you'll see when we look through it, is we can include the different aspects of authorized attendance, the different aspects of unauthorized attendance. So you've got that extra information about your school. We had a lot of feedback about getting some different comparators and different characteristics within there. So you'll notice on the pupil list report that ethnicity, EAL status, the registration group is in there. All of that leads to an enhanced individual pupil report. We've also put in some more attendance bands so you can more easily identify students whose attendance is what might be termed as severely absent, as in they've missed up to 50% of all the sessions. We've got the attendance bands that allow you to identify which students are at risk of becoming persistently absent pupils. The 360 is a very popular report. We'll have a look at it shortly, but again, you'll have noticed a couple of changes to that this year. There's a regional 360 element to it, so you can compare to the region as well as the national. There's also a weekly 360, so rather than it just being the cumulative year to date, that remains the default. You could also go back and look at individual weeks and look at a weekly 360. And there's more changes as well, still coming and will continue to arrive. We're going to have more contextual comparison in there. We have a day-to-day analysis, and I'll talk about that more shortly. All of the reports for autumn 22 and this academic year reflect the new DFE codes as they have done throughout. And we've also, I'm sure you've seen, got an end of year summary overview. So you can look back at 2021-22 and compare that and see what does attendance look like this year and how does that compare to what it looked like in previous years. So we're going to start by looking at the pupil report, the school reports rather. So the school reports, I'm going to spend a bit of time looking at the summary report because hopefully what you'll identify from this is the reports follow a very, very similar pattern. We've tried to keep them as simple as possible so that anyone from any phase can go in, have a look and make perfect sense of what the reports are showing. So this is the attendance summary report. So when you go into school reports, this is where you will land. You can look at other reports from here. You could look at a pupil groups report, a year group, absence, etc. But we're just going to start with this attendance summary report. And if we look at the top, you've got these filters. The first one I want to look at is the term. It will always default to the latest term. So in this case here, autumn 2. If you want to go back and look at the first half term, then just use the drop down and it will take you to that half term. And obviously that builds and builds as we go through the 6 half terms that make up the academic year. You've also on here got year group gender, FSM6 status, and SEND status. And again, you can use a combination of these filters. And this is a dynamic report. So if you combine these filters, it will update your figure and it will also update the national picture. Lots of schools just use this report and they use the filtering on here to get the information they need. Some schools use this just as a summary, and then when they're wanting to look at specific year groups, they'll use the year groups report. It's the same information. It really doesn't matter which one you choose to use. It can be the year groups if you prefer, or you can just filter by using this, but ultimately it's the same information. When you start looking at the information you've got on here, it will give you a year-to-date figure of your school, and it will give you the year-to-date comparison to the national, and then the difference between them. So this is a year-to-date. It then, as you'll see on there, it will then start looking at the individual weeks. So you can then start identifying weekly trends. Next to the difference at the bottom, you'll spot red and green circles. Red and green circles are not related to statistical significance. What they are related to is the difference between your school and the national picture. And basically, the darker the green, the higher above the national comparator you are. The darker the red, the lower below the national comparator you are. At the bottom, you've got these pinks and greys. The pink is always going to be the school attendance figure, and the grey is the national line. And what you'll notice with this is, this doesn't just look at the most recent term. This goes right back to the start of the academic year. So you can see straight away on here what attendance has been like all the way through the academic year from the first week in September to now. The trend lines means you can see, again, the extent to which you are above, in line, or below the national picture. The next report within the school reports is the year group report. And what this does, as you'd expect, is it focuses on individual year groups. So filters at the top will look fairly familiar. The year group filter is missing, I think, for obvious reasons, because the year groups are now here. So this will then break down. This is a secondary example, but again, for primary, this would just be reception to year 6 instead of year 7 to 11. But this allows you to see the individual year groups, look at the term in question, in this case, autumn 2, and then look at the individual figures for year groups on a week-by-week basis and see how that compares to national. If you look at the week beginning the 21st of November, you can see in this school, year 7 and 8 are above their national comparators, whereas years 9 to 11 are below. So that like-for-like comparison that we talked about right at the start, just for information, all of the data you've seen today has just been made up for the purpose of the webinar today. At the bottom, again, you're starting to see these pinks and greys again. So you'll see year 7 through to year 11, and you've got that trend line, not just for this term, but right back to the start of the academic year, showing you which year groups attendance is in line, is above, is below national. The pupil groups report, again, does what you'd expect it to do. It focuses on these different groups. So it will look at gender, it will look at disadvantage, it will look at SEND status. You'll notice at the top that a lot of the filters have gone. And again, like the year groups, for obvious reasons, you don't need the filters because they're actually front and center on the reports. What a lot of schools find really useful with this report is just focusing on a specific year group. So let's say you're responsible for year 4 or year 10. If you filter by that year group, this report should pretty much give you everything that you would need to get a really good overview of what attendance looks like in that year group. So an overall picture, a trend, a gender difference, a disadvantage difference, an SEND difference, and all of these figures, as you can see, appear here. Reds and greens, again, allow you to compare to the national comparator groups. So you can look at this on a whole school level, you can look at an individual year group level. And again, I'm sure you're used to seeing now these pinks and greys at the bottom, the pink showing the group attendance in your school, and then the grey showing the national group attendance. So you can see how it compares. Are you in line, above, below, etc.? What have the trends been like throughout the academic year for these? Finally, in terms of the school reports, we're going to look at the absence report. And as we said, one of the real joys of many joys in getting rid of the COVID impact report is we can now focus on different types of absence. So we can have more of a deep dive into the types of absence. So you can see absence initially broken down into authorized and unauthorized, but then subsequently broken down further into the different categories of authorized illness and unauthorized illness. There are certain categories that for the last 2 years haven't really been part of attendance analysis. Holiday certainly for a year to 18 months wasn't really an issue or an option for schools to worry about that. As things get back to a type of normal, holiday is now back there, so you can start seeing what does holiday absence look like in your school compared to other schools. What do exclusions, these short-term exclusions where you've not had to make alternative provision, how do they look like? How do they look in your school compared to other schools? And then again, at the bottom, you've got your pinks and your greys, so you can see straight away what the trends look like right back to the start of the academic year. Moving on to the 360 report. Now, the 360 report was launched in February and has rapidly become our most popular report, and I think for fairly obvious reasons, because it tells you straight away on one page which groups you need to be looking at to focus on. Around the same time as this came out, and there's no link between this, but Ofsted put a report out, and I've put a link to it on there. But you'll see they put in their securing good attendance report about figures being used. So an overall figure could effectively disguise variations in the attendance of groups. So you could have as a school what you think is a fairly acceptable overall attendance figure, and I'm sure it is, but sitting beneath that could be significant differences from year group to year group or from different types of FSM6 status or SEND status. So this 360 report, as you can see there, with everything on a page, hopefully allows you to just straight away focus in on which groups are doing really well compared to national and which groups might need a bit more focus. So you've got on here, you've got your different year groups. This is a secondary example, but again, primary is exactly the same. You've then got the breakdown of gender, FSM6, SEND, and then that cuts across the year groups as well. So you can straight away, by looking at the reds and greens, see, well, which groups are doing really well, which groups might we need to spend a bit more time on. You have your headline figures at the top, you've got your trend lines as well, and then at the bottom, you've got some persistent absence figures at a whole school level and also at a year group level. So every year group is broken down in your school and compared to the national equivalent. We did say there'd been some changes to this year, so just to pick up on those, the default has always been the year to date, and it remains the year to date. But what you can do on this is you can actually look at the latest week's figure. So by just selecting that drop down, you can change this to latest week. Similarly, the default has always been national and remains national. But if you want to look at different regions, then if you click on this, you've got the option of the 9 different regions. So you can select your own. You can select any. In fact, there's quite a lot of schools who are, pretty much bang on the border between 2 regions. So they might want to select their own actual region and the one that they're actually very, very close to as well. So you've got these different options where you can compare your school against national or regional data. The pupil level reports have had quite some significant change this year. So if we look at the pupil reports, along the top here, you can see on these filters lots of the different groups that we referred to earlier on. So you've got a registration group filter in there, you have EAL, you have ethnicity, all of these new filters that were requested by schools. And what these actually do is you can use these to drive the attendance and absence figure. So in this example here, we're looking at female FSM6 with a SEND category of support. And what it will then do is it will update the attendance and the absence, and then beneath absence, authorized and unauthorized absence, it will update them for that specific group. And then perhaps more importantly, it will bring up the pupils, in this case, the FSM6 girls with a support category in SEND. And you can actually look at them as a group. So it could be that this is a group, a key group in your school who you really need to focus on. And by having this information, you can go in and start looking at the week-by-week trends, but also the year-to-date figures. You can also, we talked on here about using this to identify pupils at risk of persistent absence. So in this example here, we've got year 4 FSM6 boys. We've used the attendance bands here and we've filtered every band apart from the 95% plus. So we can see straight away who are our severely absent pupils, who are classed as persistently absent, as in below 90%. But then also you can spot the 90.1 to 95%. And then if you filter within there and sort within there, you can spot those pupils who are potentially at risk of becoming persistently absent pupils. Because if you've got a student who is, say, at 91% attendance, then all it would take is a couple of days absence here and there, and that pupil could easily fall into that threshold of below 90%, which then becomes another addition to your persistently absent group of pupils. What these have done by having all these extra filters is they've given you this individual pupil report that has far greater contextual information, hopefully really useful for any kind of meetings with parents, for any kind of case studies and that kind of thing. And the other thing we've wanted to do with this is to make it really visual wherever a pupil has broken a week, as in missed sessions in a week. So you can see in this example here, the pupil's attendance is 100%. Most people's attendance is 100% week on week, but then you can see straight away here where it's dipped, because a lot of schools have said to us they would like to be able to identify pupils who are missing for part of certain weeks, because that's quite a significant concern for them. If they're not managing a full week, it could be that they're missing, the odd Monday, the odd Friday, etc. So this hopefully is a really visual way of being able to spot that. Regional Attendance Tracker was launched last year and continues this year. The link is there at the top. And what that does, I know that I've said already that you can compare this in the 360, but that's a more kind of live and up-to-date figure. This allows you to really dive into your region. So in this example, we've selected the Southwest, and it will take you right back to the start of the academic year. So you can spot the figures, you can spot any trends in regional attendance, so that you can see how that's affected you and your school through the year. As we said, FFT Education Data Lab have done an awful lot of research around attendance and the link between attendance and outcomes. We first did this at roadshows in 2019 for colleagues who might have attended back in the day when we used to have physical meetings. Hopefully that will come back soon, but this seems to work, certainly in the meantime. And we introduced something in 2019 looking at the link between attendance and outcomes. And it was clear, we found a clear link at primary. We also found a link at secondary. We had some Progress 8 figures on an individual pupil basis. And they've done some more post-pandemic to see if that link has continued. So this is last year's year 6. So current year 7, last year's year 6. It was the first year group in 3 years that had done the end of Key Stage 2 assessments because of the disruption caused by the pandemic. And what they did was they identified 4 different bands, so 0% absence to then 5, 10, and 20% absence. And they've looked at the math scale score and they've looked at the reading scale score. And you can see on here that there is a link between the amount of sessions a child has missed and the overall score that they achieved, the scale score that they achieved in maths and reading. We also do a lot of work with our colleagues at GL Assessment. We have a GCSE estimate service that is now in its 3rd year, and it's a very popular service. And we do a lot of work around the Cat4 test with them. And I'm sure a lot of you have used Cat4 tests with pupils perhaps several times as they go through your school. And what they wanted to look at was year 7 and year 8 pupils and look at the link between any sessions missed in the last academic year and the mean CAT score that they achieved when they were taking those different batteries of tests. And you can see clearly, again, the more sessions that a child miss, the bigger the impact that will have on their mean CAT score across year 7 and year 8. The other thing with this is this breaks it down further into disadvantaged and non-disadvantaged. So you can see a clear link there. So a disadvantaged pupil missing a significant number of sessions, that is going to be reflected based on this data here in their Cat4 mean score. Just to finish, we're just going to look at some new developments, and I'm going to retain the theme of FFT Education Data Lab because it's quite opportune that this has come this week, because you might well have noticed that when I talked earlier on about the attendance report homepage that you'd got used to seeing, I didn't point out that there has actually been a slight change this week. So what you'd got used to seeing is what we showed earlier on. If you log in now, you'll actually spot this new 2021-22 weekday attendance analysis in there. And that is a brand new report. And it's been developed by our colleagues at FFT Education Data Lab. Just a rider on this. This is only for schools who had attendance data with us last year, because it's looking back at 2021-22 data. It is the vast majority of those 10,000 schools. But if you were new to us this year, unfortunately, we don't have last year's data to produce this. So the weekday attendance analysis report looks back at your school's 2021-22 attendance data, and it picks up on the days and the sessions that have got the highest and lowest attendance. So you can see on here, you've got the pink is the national figure. So you've got Monday morning through to Friday afternoon. You've got it by year group. So clearly, if you are, as in this case here, if you look at year 11 on a Monday morning, the year 11 absence figure on a Monday morning is actually lower in this school than the national figure. If you then look at year 7 on a Monday morning, the year 7 absence figure on a Monday morning is actually higher than the national figure. Because what we notice as we go through year groups is there is a difference from year group to year group in attendance. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, it's predominantly going to be in my school Mondays and Fridays, and it is for quite a few schools, possibly the majority of schools, but there are differences from school to school. It doesn't necessarily mean that the best attendance is always going to be on a Wednesday for every school in the country. It changes from school to school. So what this does is it allows you to compare what the data is showing for your school with the national picture. It also allows you to compare it to the regional picture. So you can see, well, is it a regional thing? Do we have more absence on a Thursday morning? Is that something that just happens in the East Midlands, for example, or is it something specific to your school? It's broken down, as you can see, into year groups and pupil groups. There is a gender split in here. There's an FSM6 split. There's an SEND split. And the other thing that we've identified are the 5 highest and lowest attendance dates for 2021-22. So not a session. This isn't us saying Monday afternoon is your highest attending session. This is a specific date from the 190 days that you're in. Which were the 5 days that had the highest attendance? Which were the 5 that had the lowest? And then you, obviously, as a school, being the experts, you will be able to look at that and think, was there something going on that day? Is there something that we have done that day that has been a really big factor in getting attendance as high as it was? Was there something that might have been a factor in driving attendance as low as it was? Just as a bit of a spoiler for this, quite a few of the low attendance dates for some schools are around those 2 incredibly hot days in that last week of term, because it was a bit of a perfect storm if you think you've got the last week of term and the inevitable kind of drop in attendance plus the exceptionally hot weather. But again, that will probably take up perhaps 1 or 2 slots in some schools. But have a look and see what the different dates are for your school. As ever, FFT Data Lab have written a blog alongside this. For those of you who are who have received the comms that have come from me this week, there's a link to this in there as well, and there's information about how you actually access this report. So finally, looking ahead to 2023, the day-to-day analysis is out this week for the 2021-22 academic year. If that proves popular, and I'm sure it will, that's something we can look at doing on a term-by-term basis. So we could look back at the autumn term fairly soon into the new calendar year and start looking at what the autumn term peaks and troughs were in terms of days, sessions, dates, etc. We want to include more contextual comparison, and we've got something on this coming out fairly early in January, where we're going to try and compare schools to other schools with a similar level of disadvantage. And this attendance data is going to be integrated alongside all of the new features that are coming into the next generation Aspire. So you'll see attendance data alongside all of that other really important contextual information that sits within Aspire. Other changes. We have lots of schools who are using attendance tracker in some really exciting and innovative ways, and we want to make some case studies out of them and put them on the attendance homepage so you can see what schools are doing. Some schools are using it in terms of communications with parents. Some schools are using it for individual pupils, some really useful information. Some are using it for their website so they can see a comparison between them and national. We also want to introduce some forums on there as well. So schools who have got some really exciting, innovative strategies, what are they doing to try and boost their attendance? And again, these are the kind of things that as the homepage develops, we can get more and more information on there for you. The other big development around this is around the 360 and half-termly summaries. So we've moved to a weekly summary as well this year. Obviously, the default remains year to date. But if we can have a half-termly summary, it will mean that you can effectively have 6 documents, if you like, that will track each half term separately, because obviously as you move into the next one, that year to date figure will get mixed up because you've got some of autumn 1, autumn 2 and spring 1, etc. So we're going to look at introducing some half termly 360 summaries. And then finally, some other work that we're excited to share with you. We're going to try and do some enhanced persistent absence reporting. So at the minute, you've got that on a year group level. So you've got a whole school, then you've got reception through to year 6 for primary colleagues, 7 through to 11 for secondary colleagues. What a lot of schools have come to us have said and asked about is, Is it possible to have a look at persistent absence on a group basis? So could we look at our FSM6 pupils and see what their persistent absence is like? Could we look at our gender differences in persistent absences? That's something we're working on. We're going to try and do some more on frequently absent pupils. And we said how the individual pupil report hopefully allows you visually to see them a bit quicker than you would have done in the past. But we'd like to be able to introduce a filter where you can almost, well, filter on how many times a student hasn't completed a full week's attendance within your school. The other thing that we're going to be developing on in the spring term is something around geographical hotspots. So are there specific postcode areas related to the catchment area of your school where attendance is an issue? So it could be that attendance people within your school work in a specific local area, and that could have a big impact on your school. So lots of ideas, lots of changes coming ahead for 2023. As always, these reports are driven by you. And we want to make sure that what we're sharing with you is something that is going to be useful to you and that is going to get you to continue to log in and hopefully tell colleagues in other schools to continue to log in. So as I put in the comms that go out every week, please do get in touch with any kind of feedback, questions, comments, etc. that you have, because these are, as all FFT products are, these are very, very much customer driven. It's not about us, it's about people in schools who need to see these and make them work for them. Finally, these are some contact details if you want to keep in touch with us. So we run webinars on all different aspects of products that we have at FFT. If you follow us on Eventbrite, that's how you'll have booked your place today. You'll be the first to find out about our latest webinars. Our training team can do some bespoke school training if that's something that you're interested in. And there's a link to their contact details there. And our support team can be contacted via email, via phone, and we also have a live chat option now as well. They will be able to answer any of your school-specific questions. There are some Twitter handles there for FFT in general, FFT support, and then our research arm at FFT Education Data Lab. We will send out a recording of this as soon as possible. We just need to obviously make sure the recording is ready to go out to you. We'll get you a copy of the slides and they will come out to you hopefully very early next week. Next week will be the last release of Attendance Tracker before the Christmas holiday. I've already mentioned the Christmas word now, so I think given that we are relatively close to the vast majority of schools in England breaking up, just it remains for me to say thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's always a pleasure to work with colleagues. It's a pleasure to work with all the schools that support FFT on a daily, weekly, termly basis. Have a fantastic Christmas holiday when it comes. Have a very pleasant and restful break. And we look forward to continuing to work with you in 2023 and beyond. Thank you.